The most dangerous lie in money is not that rich people are lucky. It is that hard work alone will eventually be enough. I wish that were true. It would be a beautiful world if effort by itself guaranteed financial safety. It would be a beautiful world if the people who work the longest hours, lift the heaviest things, endure the worst shifts, and sacrifice the most sleep were automatically the ones who ended up with the strongest balance sheets. That is not the world we live in. And the sooner a person understands that, the sooner they can stop mistaking exhaustion for strategy. I have met roofers who worked harder than fund managers. I have met single mothers who worked harder than executives. I have met restaurant owners, cleaners, mechanics, delivery drivers, immigrant couples, and exhausted young employees whose daily effort would humble men with far larger bank accounts, and yet the money did not follow labor in a straight line. Why? Because the world does not mainly pay for effort. It pays for position, it pays for leverage, it pays for ownership, it pays for understanding rules that most people only feel the effects of. It pays for the person who can see where value actually lives and put themselves next to it. That is what I want to talk about. Not motivation, not hustle, not vague positivity about abundance. I want to talk about the architecture underneath money. Because once you stop worshiping the wrong gods, you stop asking only how hard am I working and start asking a better question. What game am I in, and how is this game really scored? That question changes everything. If you dropped me into a country where I did not understand the language, I could survive for a while. I could smile, I could point, I could imitate, I could buy lunch, I could get through a taxi ride, but I would be weak there. Other people would hear signals I could not hear. They would negotiate with subtlety I could not access. They would recognize risk, opportunity, insult, tone, contracts, loopholes, and incentives long before I knew what I was looking at. That is how many people live with money. They are not stupid. They are not lazy. They are not cursed. They are half literate in the language that governs adult life. So they work around money instead of working with it. They react instead of design. They imitate instead of negotiate. They obey rules they do not understand, which means they are always one level below the people who do. That is why I think the first great shift in finance is not income. It is literacy. Not literacy in the schoolhouse sense, practical literacy. What is debt actually doing? What is credit actually for? What is leverage? What is ownership? What is an asset? What is a liability? What does my work really produce? What is a business versus a hobby? What problem are people actually paying to have solved? What part of my life is expensive because it is useful? And what part is expensive because I am trying to perform an identity? Those are money questions. And if you cannot answer them, then you can work for years while still missing the main mechanism. The first lesson is that money itself is not moral. It is a tool. People become sentimental around money because they want to believe it carries virtue or corruption inside it. They call it greedy, they call it dirty, they call it spiritual poison, they call it freedom, they call it power. Money is not any of those things by itself. Money is an amplifier. A hammer can build a house or crack a skull. The hammer is not ethical. The hand is money behaves the same way. In clear hands it creates options. In frightened hands it creates louder fear. In generous hands, it creates larger generosity. In foolish hands, it creates scaled-up foolishness. That matters because many decent people quietly sabotage themselves by pretending distance from money is a form of virtue. They tell themselves that wanting to understand it deeply would make them selfish, shallow, aggressive, or worldly in the worst sense. I think that is backward. Ignorance does not make a person purer. It makes them easier to control. And being easy to control is expensive. If you do not understand how money works, someone who does will quietly stand between you and your own future. The second lesson is that the world rewards rules more than intentions. This is why I laugh when people say things like, I just do not like debt, or I do not trust credit, or I would rather stay away from all of it. Fine, you can dislike gravity too. Your dislike does not change the rules. Debt is not automatically evil. Credit is not automatically wise. They are tools inside a system, used badly. They become traps. They become doors. A person who uses a credit card to fund a lifestyle they cannot pay off is feeding the machine that feeds on the undisciplined. Average rates north of 20% are not financial products. They are punishment systems for people who confuse access with affordability. But a person who uses credit carefully, pays in full, builds a score, and understands that history of repayment becomes a kind of passport in modern finance. That matters. Because in America especially, credit is not merely a consumer product. It is part of the infrastructure through which larger money moves, mortgages, business loans, better rates, better options, better leverage, more flexibility. All of that is touched by the file you create through your... You may hate that system, hate it if you like. You still have to navigate it. And that is one of the great adult truths. You do not win by resenting the rules more emotionally than other people. You win by understanding the rules more clearly. That is why I tell young people that debit and credit are not the same kind of tool. A debit card spends what is already yours. A credit card, used correctly, allows you to demonstrate that you can handle borrowed trust without turning it into chaos. Used badly, it becomes gasoline on consumer fire. Used well, it becomes a part of your financial reputation. That is why literacy matters. Without literacy, debt looks like danger and credit looks like temptation. With literacy, each one becomes something you can evaluate instead of fear blindly. The third lesson is harder for people to hear. Hard work by itself does not create wealth. I did not say hard work does not matter. I said it does not explain wealth by itself. That distinction is everything. If labor alone were the answer, then some of the hardest workers on the planet would be the richest people in the world. The laborer carrying heavy materials and heat all day is not automatically wealthier than the owner of a software asset that scales. The woman cleaning offices after midnight is not automatically wealthier than the person with equity in a company she has never heard of. The couple working every hour in a struggling restaurant is not automatically wealthier than the person who controls a distribution system that takes a tiny margin from millions of transactions. Why? Because labor has a ceiling, leverage changes ceilings, ownership changes ceilings, distribution changes ceilings, systems change ceilings. This is why I get impatient with hustle culture. It flatters effort and hides economics. People are told just work harder, just want it more, just outgrind everyone. That is incomplete advice bordering on fraud, if given without nuance. Hard work is useful. It is even noble. But if all you are doing is selling more hours into a structure you do not understand, you may become exhausted without ever becoming free. That is why I ask a different question. How is value created here? Not how busy am I, not how tired am I. How is value actually created? Where does the money pool sit? Who controls the thing that scales? Who owns the asset? Who can solve the bottleneck? Who can improve the machine in a way that makes the system stronger, even when they are not physically present every second? That is where wealth begins to gather. I sometimes think the most useful way to divide people in the modern economy is not white collar versus blue collar, or entrepreneur versus employee. It is fixer versus freeloader. The fixer sees disorder and becomes curious. The freeloader sees disorder and becomes theatrical. The fixer asks what is broken, why is it broken, who suffers when it breaks, and what would people gladly pay to have work better. The freeloader explains why the problem exists, why the system is unfair, why the room is stupid, why the market is irrational. I have no objection to diagnosis, but money is often waiting on the far side of repair, and that is why fixers so often win. Inside companies, the people who rise are often not the ones who simply carry tasks. They are the ones who understand where profit, efficiency, retention, distribution, and speed actually sit. They know what the machine needs. They know what hurts if they stop. They know how to explain their value in the language the business itself respects. That is a stronger position than simply saying, I work very hard. A company may thank you for effort. It tends to pay more for economics. So, one of the smartest questions an employee can ask is not, am I working hard? It is how do I make this place money, not in slogans, in specifics. How does my work increase revenue, improve retention, speed delivery, lower errors, increase client value, strengthen the machine? Once you understand that, negotiation changes. You stop arguing from sweat and begin speaking from consequences. That is leverage of understanding. And it also hints at something deeper. The people who move from bricklayer to builder to architect to city planner are not usually just doing more. They are seeing more. They understand systems, not merely tasks. That is why knowledge stacks matter so much in the modern economy. The future is not guaranteed to the person who can execute one skill decently, because decent execution is getting cheaper all the time. AI will make average output more available in many fields. That means the person who wins is often the one who combines 2 or 3 useful abilities in a way that creates unusual clarity. Finance plus communication, sales plus operations, design plus distribution, product plus storytelling, people plus systems, law plus business data plus judgment. These combinations become powerful because value often hides at intersections. That is what many people miss when they try to map their careers. They look only at titles. They should be looking at combinations. The fourth lesson is that so-called passive income is mostly a branding phrase. People adore the phrase because it sounds like escape without sacrifice. Money in your sleep, work once, get paid forever. It is the dream of pure leverage detached from mess. Life is rarely that clean. Yes, some income can become detached from direct hours. Assets can distribute cash. Businesses can generate flows. Investments can pay you. But almost everything called passive still contains an earlier season of active work, capital management, oversight, risk, volatility, maintenance, or dependence on structures somebody had to build and still occasionally protect. This is not a reason to reject it. It is a reason to stop romanticizing it. Passive income is often active effort dressed in more flattering language. The same thing is true of entrepreneurship. People say, I cannot start a business because I do not have the money. Sometimes what they really mean is, I do not understand how capital actually moves. The rich rarely buy everything with cash. They use debt, equity, investor capital, partnerships, grants, revenue-based financing, lines of credit, business lending, structural money. This does not mean recklessness. It means the beginner's rule is not the builder. The beginner thinks I must personally possess every dollar before I can move. The builder thinks I must understand where capital comes from, what it costs, and how to structure it without destroying myself. That difference is enormous. It is also why I do not tell people to quit their jobs just because they found a passion. I have seen too much romantic nonsense sold under the banner of courage. You do not need to leap off a cliff to prove sincerity. Often the more intelligent path is to keep the base income while testing the business on the side. That reduces desperation. It forces the business to prove itself. It allows you to discover whether this thing is actually a commercial engine or simply something you love doing. A hobby is something you enjoy. A business is something that reliably solves a problem in a way others will pay for. Those categories can overlap wonderful when they do. But they are not the same category, and people lose years when they confuse them. This is why I say learn to love the game more than the costume. You may think you want to be a glamorous founder, a celebrity chef, a famous creator, a talk show host, a public personality, a visible icon. Fine. But the smarter question is, where does the money actually flow in the world that attracts me, and can I attach myself to that flow more intelligently than my fantasy originally suggested? That is how real careers get built. People stop worshiping what looks prestigious and start studying what is profitable, scalable, and structurally durable. The fifth lesson is social. Environment changes economics. This is a harder truth than people like to admit. Who you spend time around changes how you think about money. Standards are contagious. Ambition is contagious. Chaos is contagious. Normalcy is contagious. If you spend enough time with people who talk about investing normally, who negotiate without panic, who do not turn every purchase into status theater, who understand delayed gratification, who build instead of only react. That will change you. If you spend enough time with people whose money is always a crisis, always a performance, always a source of short-term emotional relief, that will change you too. This is not judgment, it is gravity. And gravity shows up especially in two places, friendship and partnership. People hemorrhage money socially all the time because they are afraid to look constrained. They split bills they cannot comfortably afford. They say yes because no feels embarrassing. They finance belonging with spending. That is not a tiny habit. It is a quiet poverty machine. There is enormous power in simple honesty. I am trying to save more right now. I am investing heavily this year. I am just going to cover my portion tonight. That may feel awkward once. It often feels liberating after that. And if the relationship cannot survive your honesty, then the relationship was more expensive than you admitted. Partnership matters even more. I am not giving romantic advice here. I am speaking economically. Life with the wrong partner is expensive in ways a spreadsheet struggles to describe. Life with the right partner can be one of the most powerful accelerators of peace, stability, and long-term strength. Not because love is a financial instrument, because alignment matters, values matter, shared direction matters, stability matters. Two people pulling together can compound more than money. Two people pulling against one another can destroy far more than money. People often screen for surface metrics and miss the deeper question, not just what does this person earn, what game are we building together? That is the stronger question. The sixth lesson is that housing is not. This one makes people emotional because buying a home has been sold as adulthood itself. Own and you are serious, rent and you are behind. I think that is lazy thinking. Markets change, rates change, prices change, maintenance exists, flexibility has value, identity pressure clouds, arithmetic. There are seasons when buying is clearly attractive. There are seasons when renting can be the more intelligent choice. If buying doubles your monthly outflow, traps a huge down payment, loads you with maintenance, taxes, illiquidity, and fixed identity pressure, then the spreadsheet deserves your respect. Renting is not always throwing money away. Sometimes it is buying flexibility. Sometimes it is preserving optionality. Sometimes it is the more rational move for a life that is still changing. Do not let scripts inherited from previous generations bully you into pretending the math means what it used to mean. It may not. And this points to another deep truth: expectations can ruin people faster than low income. If you think adulthood must look a certain way by a certain age, then every delay feels humiliating. Every rent payment feels like public failure. Every market shift feels personal. That pressure pushes people into obligations they are not ready for, simply because waiting feels emotionally expensive. I would rather be intelligently patient than publicly impressive. That has always seemed like the higher quality decision. The seventh lesson is about investing. Investing is boring if you are doing it properly. I say that warmly. People assume excitement is opportunity. Usually excitement is story. Story is not return. My own bias has long been toward simple, low-cost, broad diversification, index funds, big baskets of productive businesses, consistent contributions, minimal drama, minimal interference, a willingness to pay the true cost of investing, which is uncertainty, volatility, and the inability to know precisely when the reward will arrive. That is what markets really ask from you, not brilliance, temperament. The more complex the strategy, the lower the odds most people will actually stay with it through ugly years, and staying matters enormously. Compounding is not asking you to be theatrical. It is asking you to remain. That is why patience may be the most underrated financial virtue in the world. Patience with your plan, patience with your progress, patience with your own unfinishedness, patience with boring systems that still usually outperform emotional drama over long periods. And now I want to leave you with the final lesson. You do not need to know everything. You need to know enough to stop being helpless. That is a very different standard. Many people avoid money because they think the field is too large, too technical, too full of terms they should have learned earlier. Start smaller, learn the language, understand credit, understand debt, Understand how your work creates value, understand how capital moves, understand the difference between a hobby and a business, understand who you become around different people, understand that hard work matters, but leverage explains why some effort scales and some does not. Understand that money is a tool, understand that rules matter whether or not you approve of them. And once you understand those things, act not to sound informed, to become effective. Because wealth does not begin when you first make a lot of money. It begins the moment money stops feeling like a mystery and starts becoming a language you can finally speak with confidence. Once that happens, the world changes shape. You do not react the same way. You do not spend the same way. You do not choose the same people, the same risks, the same obligations, or the same opportunities. That is why literacy matters so much. It is not just information, it is leverage. And that is the kind of financial leverage I have always trusted most.